This is Viterbi Voices.
Coming to you from the University of Southern California, Viterbi School of Engineering.
We're here to give you the inside scoop on research, classes, student life, and so much more.
All of these shared by students, faculty, alumni, and other members of the USC community.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Viterbi Voices. As usual, I am one of your hosts. My name is Paul Ledesma, Executive Director of Undergraduate Admission here at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering.
Hey, everybody. I am your other co-host. My name is Maya. I'm a current senior at the University of Southern California studying Industrial and Systems Engineering.
Maya, how's it going?
Life is good. It's going good. I am actually speaking to some prospective students at an information session later today. So looking forward to doing my intro again for real life people.
Fun. Very cool. You're doing the afternoon?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, you're not doing the morning because that's right now. I just realized what time it was. Good. Cool. Great. I'm glad to see that. I just looked at that right before we came on. It's like 2 students, so don't worry about it.
Hey, we're gonna be best friends now. Me and those 2
small
students.
Group today. This morning is about 50 students, so that's good. So or about 50 people. So, well, it is. What an interesting weekend to put out a podcast. Admission decisions were just released. I think there's probably something that ran right before this episode about how to sign up for admitted student events. And so if you've been admitted, please do so. Yay, we're excited to get in contact and to be able to talk to you about this opportunity, these programs. There's so many things happening for you to sign up in your admission portal. But life still continues on here at the Viterbi School for all of our current students as they're going through their last. What are we in, Maya? We got what?
Week 10. So we took a break of spring break last week. So week 10 now.
Week 10. So we got 4 weeks left. 4 or 5.
Yeah, don't remind me of it. Oh my gosh. It's like
crazy.
It goes really quickly once it gets towards the end of the semester as well, when it's finals time. And like some classes will have a final exam, some classes will have projects, but regardless, like those last 2 weeks feel like fake weeks. So
yeah. We will push a lot of our discussion, and as I said before, the nickname we had for it is the witty banter to the other side of the podcast. So stay tuned through this episode on the back end to hear some updates from everyone. But let's get into what this episode is. This is another one of our alumni episodes. We bring to you today Bria Jamison, or arguably in certain parts of the country may be pronounced Jamison, which is a part of the conversation that you'll hear. But Bria Jamison is one of our alumni, and she is a student that studied environmental engineering. She got her bachelor's degree in environmental engineering in 2018. She went immediately into our progressive degree program and got a master's in green technologies in 2019. She is no stranger to the podcast because actually she was on the podcast as a student back in the day. And so I made a joke in the beginning about how we've now reached a point where our alumni episodes are catching up with people that were on the podcast originally. Just to show how old it is. But Bria is a very, very close friend of mine because she worked in our office, not only as she was a Viterbi student ambassador, we hired her as an intern. So she worked in the office, and then she was a graduate associate during her graduate year and was working in a paraprofessional role and helping to recruit students and running our events, somewhat like a staff member, and did lots of great stuff. And so she does some really cool stuff. But her work has always been focused on the water energy nexus, on environmental remediation. She's done a lot of work in decarbonization and is currently a science fellow at the Department of Energy in the federal government. And so she was previously an environmental consultant and engineer at Ramboll. And she talks all about what that means and how she was brought in to fix environmental problems for companies and governments across the board, but then has now accepted a fellow position and is currently in Washington, D.C. in the Department of Energy. She does amazing, cool stuff. She is a very, very cool person. I'm excited for everyone to get to know her a little bit better and to hear about her work. And we dive into not only the discipline of environmental engineering, the complexities of environmental engineering, but also the work that's being done in the federal government and how she's making a difference. So let's get out of the way and hand it over to me again and Bria. There she is. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am great. I am great. You're joining us from some sort of galaxy.
The Carina Nebula from the James Webb Space Telescope, of course.
Awesome. How is everything? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I am coming to you from the Carina Nebula as seen in Washington, D.C. I am living in a different time zone now. I'm from California, so it's been a big change for me.
Yeah, I know. I was out right before basically bringing you on. I was like, well, we have a lot to catch up on because I didn't know anything about this big move, which not that I was supposed to. It's not like you're supposed to keep this up, but it was super exciting to learn that you're doing other things. But before we get into all of that, first, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. It's going to be super fun, and of course, it is. This is we've reached this point of how long we've been doing this podcast that now we have alumni interviews with people that were on the podcast originally back in the day.
I know. I was like, should I go back and listen to my old episode? And I'm like, no, I don't need to do that to myself.
I thought about doing it. I really did, but we can go back to like old time episodes back way back, like I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, almost now at this point, I think is when it was.
Yep. Like
Wow.
2016-ish. It was right around when I studied abroad. So it's
Oh
a
my,
while.
oh my gosh, that's so crazy. Well, anyways, I am again glad that you're here, and thank you for being here, Bria. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you did at USC, all that jazz, especially now that you're in your USC sweatshirt and everything. Like you came
I
themed to the
know.
conversation.
I know. My most comfy sweatshirt. So yeah, I am start at the beginning. I am born and raised in Bakersfield, California, and that is a feels like a small town, but actually a relatively big city in central California. It's a big oil and farming community. So when
Mhm.
I went to LA, it was only about a 2-hour drive, and so didn't go too far for school. I studied environmental engineering at USC, so I did both my undergrad education there, and then I also got a master's degree in green technologies. And some of my time at USC, I really got involved in things related to DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So the Society of Women Engineers was a big thing that I was involved in that I've kind of continued through my time. Even now, I'm actually meeting with the current SWE president next week because she also works
Oh, really?
at the Department of Energy. Yeah, so things full circle. But yeah, so that was some of the things I did at USC, and then I also did lots of internships, and one of those internships turned into a full-time job after I got my master's degree with an environmental consulting firm. And so I was doing a little bit of work with contaminated sites in the Southern California area, groundwater and soil pollution, investigating and then doing remediation. And so that's a
Wow.
little bit of what I was doing around my time at USC. And then now I'm in Washington, D.C. So,
I thought I would go back and like take it chronological, but I just decided I'm gonna flip it. Okay, so recently you've taken on a new role in that you
mhm.
are a policy fellow at the Department of Energy and Science and Technology. I mean, tell me what is this role? This sounds super exciting. How did this all happen? What are you doing? You're in Washington, D.C. What's happening?
Yes. So I am doing a science and technology policy fellowship. And so essentially, this organization, AAAS, or the American Association for the Advancement of Science, they run Science Magazine.
Hmm.
They do a few fellowships, but the one I'm in is science and technology policy focused. And so they bring in it's mostly PhDs, but scientists and engineers. If you are an engineer with a master's degree and some industry experience, which I am, you are also eligible, but it's really mostly scientists with PhDs and bringing them in from academia or industry into roles in the federal government. And so fellows are spread across the three different branches of government, judicial, legislative, Congress, and then also the administration's executive agencies. And so that's like the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, which is where I am, the Department of State, doing foreign affairs, things like that. And the idea is to bring in a scientific, technical expertise into the world of policy, and then vice versa. Not all fellows stay in the world of policy. And so bringing that policy mindset, understanding how federal laws work and how money flows through Congress and how that affects scientific work, bringing that back into places like academia and industry and nonprofits. So sort of a cross-pollination of different types of expertise. And it's scientists from all different, stripes. So there's public health. I'm, of course, in environmental and climate change. There's also social scientists. So it's a huge range. And I think it's
Wow.
really great because a lot of things I learned at USC, collaboration and communication, that is kind of the ethos of this fellowship also, is really understanding scientific communication to better solve problems.
Wow. So is this and correct or educate my ignorance here. Does this mean you're in politics now, or is it what does this mean? And also, does this mean that this is a full-time gig? Are you still working? Like, help me
Yes.
understand.
Okay.
Like,
Good question.
because
So it
one
is
of
a
the
full-time gig.
yeah, because one of the things that when you say like I'm on a fellowship, it almost from an academic standpoint, it sounds like you're on like a sabbatical or something like that. Like, oh, like, she's just doing this thing for a little while, not coming back. But this is a real job. This is some serious stuff going on.
Yes. So it is kind of like a sabbatical. So and it's a range of experiences. So I am fairly recent in my career. I only graduated
Yeah.
from USC in 18 and 19, but we have professors who are literally on sabbatical for just a year and they
Mm-hmm.
will be going back. So it is temporary. It's 1 to 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a full-time gig. Technically, I'm not an employee of the Department of Energy. I'm placed in a program, but yes, it is a paid
Yeah.
position. It is essentially like a job. There's just lots of rules in the federal government of the types of decisions you can make depending on whether you're an actual federal employee or not. But
Got
it's
it.
kind of nice because as a fellow, we have, we're getting paid, it's full time, but we have a lot of flexibility on what we do. They really want us to kind of take projects and run with them, and being able to do your own professional development and those types of things, because there is an eye towards what you do when the fellowship ends.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of fellows do stay in the federal government, but like I mentioned before, a lot go back out into other sectors of the economy. And so we get a lot of sort of leeway to kind of make the fellowship what we want. So the things that I'm focusing in my office are not the exact same things that the fellow who had my position before was doing, because she had different interests. So you do kind of have a little bit of leeway to run with it.
And you're focused on that water decarbonization and also the water energy nexus and how this all kind of comes together. Can you explain what that means, and then also what you're doing in your current role towards those projects?
So I'll start by talking about the water energy nexus, and I'll try not to use too much jargony words because a lot of, the names of all of our offices and even the word decarbonization, it's a little, they're kind of, nebulous sounding things to talk about. And so the water energy nexus, it's really the idea that it takes a lot of water to generate energy and move it around. And you can think of things like nuclear power plants and cooling and those types of things. And then vice versa, it takes a lot of energy to move around and to treat water so that we can have it coming out of our taps clean and safe for us to use. And also on the back end, that your wastewater is going to go somewhere and get cleaned and not be polluting the environment. And so my role in the water energy nexus is really that second part. I'm a water person at the Department of Energy, looking at not just the energy implications of treating water and moving it around the country, but also the greenhouse gas emissions implications. And so my office is called the Industrial Efficiency and Decarbonization Office. And
Sounds
really
exciting.
what we look I know, right? And so really what I'm doing in my group is looking at mitigating greenhouse gas emissions from water and wastewater treatment. And specifically, something I didn't really realize, even though I did 4 years of an environmental engineering degree, that there are a lot of emissions that just directly come from wastewater treatment, just based on the chemical and biological processes. Like nitrous oxide and methane are just, when you break down wastewater, they're just naturally emitted. And so trying to figure out ways to mitigate those, along with having better energy efficiency, that's kind of the issues that I'm working on.
Interesting. And since you've arrived in Washington, you got there in September, it sounds like. What was most surprising to you about what you thought this role was going to be versus what it is?
So it's a great question, because I always wanted to do something in public policy. I always knew I wanted to move to DC and work in the government, but spending 3 years working in private industry, the consulting world is quick. You're on fast deadlines. You are largely operated by money and profits. And so moving into the federal government, which has a lot more thinking, a lot more meeting with people, connecting, figuring out ways that you can kind of develop new programs and things like that. I found that I was really used to executing things and being told, like, this is what we're doing and now we're going to do it. And there's not so much creativity. So now I'm kind of working in a space where I have a lot of freedom to come up with new ideas and implement, my spin on things. And I wasn't really expecting that, but it's good and bad, because I'm a little overwhelmed with having to come up with, things. And I just wasn't expecting that. But I'm trying to kind of change my mindset to be able to be productive in a different type of space.
How long will you be there?
So I will be here for 2 years. I did renew for the second year. So probably September 2025, around then is when I'll be done.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And how have you, born and raised in Bakersfield, went to school in LA. You're essentially southern-ish California your entire life. What has DC been like for you? You've now just gone through your first winter.
Yes. Okay. I love winter. I love the cold. I have to tell you, the problem with the East Coast is the humidity. Like the summer is just disgusting.
Yeah.
So to me, I love all of that about it. And honestly, the one thing I can say about a city like DC is it is so easy to get around, which is kind of silly, but the metro system and being able to walk everywhere, it is just
that metro's
life-changing.
Great.
Yeah.
That metro's
and so
great.
I did use the metro in LA, but it's not the same.
It's not. No, and it's not the same. I mean, especially DC, places like DC, New York, even Chicago to an extent. Like, it's just the idea of, like, wherever you are, just hop on and you're going to find your way to wherever you're going. And it makes a lot of sense. I remember one of my recruiting trips, I was very proud. I was doing like Philly, DC, and New York. And I prided myself on, I never got an Uber. Like, I just went straight from airport to train to hotel, back to train to hotel to event and everything else. And I was like, I did that entire trip without any cars. And I was really proud of myself. I've since never done it. It's
freeing.
Yeah.
It's a little freeing, not worrying about your car and things like that. I used to drive when I was working in contaminated sites everywhere, all over Southern California. I have been through it. I will tell you, though, that in DC and in this area of the East Coast, the drivers are way worse. Mean. The traffic is way worse. People are like, but you're from LA. And I'm like, LA does not even compare. I'd way rather drive in LA.
LA has this rap of like, oh my God, the traffic. I'm like, traffic is fine. I think the thing that's interesting about LA traffic is that it has a very predictable heartbeat. Like, you know exactly what's going to happen and exactly when it's not going to happen. And when you're in it, it just flows. And everywhere else doesn't work that way. And also, everyone here knows how to drive through it. It's just people that aren't from LA that are like, "Oh my God, it's crazy!" Like, it's not. It's just you don't know what you're doing. Like, this is easy.
Yes, I totally agree. Here, it's like a black box. I need to leave like 20 minutes early just to make sure that I can account for all the weird things that are going to happen.
Well, also, LA has you've got 5 ways to get everywhere. When you drive, I mean, where are we going to go? Okay, let's go this route or that route or this route or that route. And everywhere else is you only got the one way. And so that's basically it. You got to get on that one highway and that is it. If you can't get there any other way, you're stuck.
Absolutely.
Well, that is awesome. Very cool. And you're there now, coming up on what's been, all over the news lately, is all the cherry blossoms about to bloom. It's happening, right? How is that?
Peak bloom is upon us. Well, it's interesting because it's very, very related to, the weather, and the weather here varies so much. It'll snow one week and then the next week it's literally 70 degrees. And here we're expecting peak bloom in like a week, and a lot of people plan trips. I have friends who are coming for trips as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But it's been very warm the past few days that it could skip up a week. And so a lot of people are saying you need to go this weekend because they may be gone. And so it is kind of the fickleness of the
Wow.
cherry blossoms. But I'm super excited because last year when I interviewed, it was in April. And so that was my first time on the East Coast and in DC, and I didn't get to see them. So I'm gonna see them.
That's awesome. That's cool. Becky will be out there in DC in a couple
Oh yeah.
weeks.
That's what I thought you might be messaging me about when I heard from you, and I was like, "You guys gonna be out in DC?"
Well, if you want, hey, I'm sure she'd be down to have you and host you up for at least a dinner or something. And if you wanted to talk to some students, but yeah, we got a bit of student events out there in DC.
Okay. Yeah, maybe
And
I'll hit her up.
yeah, and you'll meet. She's bringing our new staff member, Brooke. So it's a whole party. So it'll be good times. All after
Nice.
this, I'll connect you guys. Um, so you are out there in DC. You're working on these large problems, but this was kind of an extension of your professional world where you were working at Ramble for over 4 years. You were doing lots of stuff there. What is Ramble? And you mentioned it earlier, consulting, because this word gets
Mhm.
thrown around a lot by engineers, and I think a lot of people don't know what it means. And also specifically, there are consulting companies, and then there's like Ramble, which is not like it's not
Not
like
like a big
Accenture.
four.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So can you? I threw a lot at you. It's not really a very straightforward question, but I think you understand where I'm getting at. Which is like, what is Ramble? What were you doing there? And then how do you explain what your environmental consulting is?
Yes. And so, yes, whenever I tell people I'm consulting, I try to be very clear that it's environmental consulting because they think I work at like Deloitte or, one of
Right.
these other types of firms. And it's not really like
Yeah.
that,
How dare you? I'm
I
not like
know.
that.
I'm like, I didn't do that. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so I mean, consulting in general, the idea is that an organization, a company, a government, any type of organization is bringing in experts in some different type of expertise to help them solve a problem. So my consulting firm, Ramble, we worked in environmental consulting, and we're solving environmental problems on the broadest way to look at it, but more specifically, I was looking at contaminated sites. So that would be like groundwater and soil pollution that is mostly related to human health. So if the groundwater is polluted, are there vapors that are coming up into buildings that are causing people cancer or other types of health issues? We also have things like an air quality group where they're looking at maybe refineries who have, noxious air pollutants that are affecting the community. We have an ESG, which is I don't even know if I know the acronym, environment, social, like government, something like that, where they do consulting in helping with, sustainability types of efforts and good governance types of efforts in companies. So that's just sort of a few of the different types of things we Ramble does. And my role specifically in contaminated sites, it was really more the public health side of environmental engineering. So for the most part, people don't really care if soil has metals or chemicals in it unless it's going to hurt someone, right? And
Right.
so that was really kind of the main thing that we were looking at. And so literally what I would do as part of those investigations is we'd have a client, they have some type of environmental issue where they want to know if they have an issue. And I was the person, the field engineer who actually goes out to that client's factory, dry cleaner, development site, and
Mm.
work with drillers to collect soil samples, install groundwater wells, and monitor, the water and look at the environment in those ways. And so taking all of that data and trying to figure out, okay, now we have a problem, we've characterized it, how are we going to remediate it? And that's really the engineering side of it, is figuring out what types of systems are we going to implement to fix the problem. And groundwater and things beneath the ground surface are really interesting because there's no way to truly know what it looks like down there until you pull it out and look at it. And
Mm.
then what you just pulled out is gone. And so we can model it and we can get an idea, but every site is different. Different parts of the country are different. 5 feet over is different. So
Mm.
that always kind of kept it interesting with, I wasn't working on the same type of system every single day. It was always varying and working with different types of people all the time and working outside, which I actually really, really enjoyed. It was a
Yeah.
huge plus for me.
Yeah. Without naming any names, can you share any type of like wow, that was a really huge contamination issue, and this is like probably the biggest thing we ever fixed, or it never got fixed. I don't know.
Yeah, using the word fixed is the tough one.
Sorry, yeah, sorry, yeah, it's a trigger word.
Yes, but I mean, I would say we had this very large site in like southeastern California, kind of east of Orange County. It was a
Hmm.
former aerospace testing facility,
Mm.
and it was kind of in a small town, and this contamination was so widespread and had not been attacked for so many years that it was essentially under this entire town. And what we were doing to mitigate it, that was the interesting part about the project, is because it was so widespread, we implemented every type of technology you can imagine. We had, my favorite one was remediation. So one area of the site, we planted a bunch of poplar trees, and the groundwater would move through towards a river and it would clean it up that way. But we
Wow.
also had other, extraction systems and injection systems, and injecting like sort of chemical walls in areas to stop the migration. And so that one is going to be going on for a very long time.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's definitely nowhere near fixed, but it was a really interesting project where you can really get your experience in a variety of things with just one client. So I really enjoyed that project, especially the trees.
Yeah, exactly. That's super cool. In that situation, I'm just more curious now. Who pays for that? Who's hiring Ramble like to do all that stuff? Is that the city? Is that the state? Is that the ex company that caused those issues? Is that a legal issue that has to be figured out later?
So, and depending on the situation, all of the above, it's almost always the whoever is considered the responsible party for the contamination.
Mm,
And I mean, let me tell you, it's millions and millions of dollars depending
yeah.
on what it is. So, environmental contamination can put companies out of business. It is a very expensive problem that has almost no return on investment because you were
Hmm.
really just cleaning up to the regulators. So typically what happens is the state or a local regulatory agency will send them a letter saying, we think you caused contamination here, like you need to clean it up. And then from there, they would hire a consultant typically. And that's where you start the project. And so the consultant's role is really to be the technical eye to really understand the science behind everything that's happening, but also to understand the regulatory eye. What
Mm,
does the California EPA, California's local environmental protection agency, what are they looking for? They have stricter standards than the federal government. What types of technologies are they comfortable with? Are they going to be willing to pilot something new? And what types of regulations are they really going to be stringent on? And
mm.
so the consultant's kind of like the middle person. And I never saw myself necessarily as just representing the client that we had, because you also need to look at, we need to meet whatever the EPA wants us to do, and they represent the public. So it is really
Yeah.
important to kind of understand those two not competing, but different drivers behind what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Different mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
So when your fellowship concludes, are you going back to that job, or are you kind of open to possibilities of things that might happen?
I am so open. I have no idea. I
Okay.
thought I would want to stay in the federal government, but honestly, I miss kind of the fast-paced world of industry. I don't really want to do contaminated sites. Now I'm working on more climate change focused things, and
Mm,
so I want to get more into energy, water stuff. But I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. But I guess she's still my mentor, Dr. Kelly Sanders from
yeah.
USC.
Yeah.
She just came out to DC last month, and she has a position in the White House, a temporary position working on energy policy for the president's Office of Science and Technology Policy. And so trying to, meet with other people who have different experiences in the space to understand what are the other paths for me. Because this is the first time in my life that I don't have a plan.
Is that exciting? Is it scary?
It's both, because I feel like usually I have an idea of where I want to go, and I thought that this, I knew what the next step would be after this. And
Right.
so it is scary, but I am also trying to see it as an opportunity. This is a pivot point that I could do whatever I want. I just don't know what I want.
Right. I feel like we've had this conversation before.
Really. You're
Yeah,
getting deja
which
vu.
is no, yeah, I feel like you and I have had this conversation about like having plans and
Oh yeah.
like freaking out when a plan is not in place or when it didn't work out. I'm having
Well,
I'm having flashbacks.
Well, speaking of control, I think our last podcast we talked about, because we were talking about studying abroad, and I was so scared of
Yeah.
flying. And
Yeah.
you're like, you've got control issues. And I'm like,
Yes.
you're right.
See, that's now see, oh, you're exact. That's what it was. I remember that
Yeah.
exactly. I remember that exactly. And then it turned out fine, right?
Yes. Yes. And now I fly all the time.
I remember that. Oh my God. I remember you sitting in my office exactly in that
Mhm.
conversation. That is so crazy. Yes. I'm like, see, I knew it. I'm like, wait, we've had this talk before. I just don't remember the specifics. So thank you. Yes, that's totally right.
I
Um,
do think my mindset has shifted a bit since then, though. I am trying to
sure.
be, more open, but oh no, certainly still
Oh
want to control
yeah.
the outcomes. You want to pick something that you know is going to go well.
Oh yeah. Well, no, don't get me wrong. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's one of those things to be aware of. Like I will almost always tell people, I believe it about myself, I believe it about everybody, is that like your biggest strength can be one of your biggest weaknesses. Like as you move forward in life. Like if you lean into something too hard, it's just like, oh, that messed me up. So it just teaches you the ideas of wax and wane, ebb and flow. Like you got to
Mhm.
find that flexibility. And what's really funny is that over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 episodes here on the podcast, there's been this consistent thread of, man, if only I had been more flexible to that point. Like if only if I had just let that happen, or that lesson taught me that I needed to let that next thing happen without my control of it. That's going on recently over the last couple episodes. And it's funny that it comes up here as well, because it's a consistent conversation point among engineers. Like, oh man, the lesson I'm learning is flexibility. I just need to like let things
Mhm.
go. But it's scary when you're thinking about your future. Like what it almost feels like you're losing if you don't have a plan, but that just isn't necessarily true, because things start to
Yeah.
fall into place. And also to our listeners, you have lots of irons in the fire. It's not like you're like, oh, I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
what's going to happen. Like you have lots of things going. You're just kind of like saying, I don't know what's going to end up. I'm like, yeah, but you don't know which of these 5 things in front of you that you've been working on actively is going to be the one that hits.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not worried about finding something next. And especially being in a fellowship like this, a huge part of it is networking. So I feel
Yeah.
pretty confident that
Yeah.
that will be fine. But yeah, to your point, it is definitely something that I'm trying to figure out that I haven't really done before. And I am also, as I get older, I'm trying to figure out, well, what really matters to me in life.
Yeah.
How much do I want to
Right.
work all the time, and what type of job is really going to fill my cup up, and how much time do I want to make sure I have for family, and figuring that stuff out is another kind of factor that I didn't really process too much before.
That takes me to like a whole other line of questioning here, which is, you know, we've been talking a lot lately. I've been talking a lot lately about the pandemic, and
Mhm.
what I'm calling kind of pandemic echoes of like things are like we saw spikes in data points and things about applications and et cetera, like when the pandemic happened. And then like 4 years later, we're seeing this other thing happen, right? So that could be anecdotal about what students are like, because the incoming class this year, just to give some context, the incoming class of 2024 went through their freshman year in the pandemic, freshman year of high school in the pandemic. The
Mhm.
graduating class of students from USC this year went through their freshman year in college in the pandemic. And so we have these like really unique cultural milestones of like this set of students is different than that set of students. And with you, I'm recognizing it was your first year of professional work
Mhm.
in the pandemic. And so you were essentially raised professionally in your first couple of years in a pandemic world. How has that affected your outlook on what jobs are like, or what industry work is like? Because that's kind of what you were getting at. Like, what's important to me? And I
Mhm.
remember asking the same questions of myself during the pandemic. What's important to me? And I work, just so you know, I work entirely different now than I ever did when you were working
Yeah,
with
where's your
us.
suit, Paul?
Yeah. As you can tell, I'm not in a suit. As you can tell, I'm not in the office.
Mhm.
I'm sitting in my bedroom as I do most days of the week.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so I started work in the summer of 2019, and luckily I had had some internships, and I did have, a little less than a year of actually working in the pre-pandemic world, the previous normal. And so I did a little bit have that experience of starting off and kind of knowing the
Okay.
people I worked with and things like that. But to your point, as far as the different ways that people see the new ways of working, I worked a lot in naturally recruitment and onboarding of our new staff
Yeah.
and kind of bringing them in and training them and leading that effort in my office. And I found them coming in who they had spent school in the pandemic and things like that. They were coming in with totally different mindsets. You know, I used to work 60-hour weeks and you didn't get paid overtime and you didn't complain and
Hmm.
you canceled dinner that night because that's just what you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is not at all what they were willing to do. And hearing them say that to me, even though I was willing to do those types of things, it's easier to fight for someone else than yourself, you know? And so I
Yeah.
found myself kind of this middle ground between these people who are asking for honestly pretty normal working conditions. It's not crazy to want to know how many hours you're going to work in a week and
Yeah.
know when you're going to get home and,
Yeah.
have that flexibility. And
Yeah.
so they really pushed me to kind of be their advocate and try to change the way that we saw that in our workplace. And that changed my own mindset of like, well, yeah, like why don't I have the same type of idea of my life outside of work is also important. And so having the newer staff, and some of them from slightly different generation than me, they really kind of opened my eyes and pushed me to see things differently. And I hope that I was able to somewhat implement that in our firm, because we did start instituting 40-hour work weeks, which sounds crazy and things like that,
Like
but
it's revolutionary.
I know, but I mean, I'm a big believer in that stuff is actually, you're investing. I do
Yeah.
believe that investing in people really will have a positive impact later. And so I think that it's also more effective.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
it's a totally different world. And to your point of, yeah, no, we're gonna keep working. We're gonna keep going. And the amount of like, I don't, it was never a rule. Nothing was ever a rule. Nothing was ever written down. You just kept working. And
Mhm.
I will tell you just internally, we are so much more productive now in what we do. Like we are spending
True.
less time and getting more results on what we're actually doing. Like we're
Mhm.
so much more focused, so much more effective and efficient with some of the projects that we're working on. And I believe happier. There is a downside to that, is that I never see any of my staff in person, like at all.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe once every couple weeks I'll see another one of them. But we're on Zoom all the time. But it's one of those things where every once in a while I have to keep checking in and say, is this still working? Are you guys cool with this? Because like I know I am, but I'm also I will out myself all the time. Like I'm the grumpy old man who's completely happy being alone at home. Like I'm alone at home and I'm fine. But I know that for some of our staff, being, late 20s, the idea of a
Mhm.
workplace is a big part of that process. And that's not for me.
Yes. Yeah, you're
How-
in a different place. One, even at my time at the DOE, I actually just got back earlier this week. My office, we're split between DC and Golden, Colorado, which is right outside
oh,
Denver.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we had an offsite, team
yeah,
building type of meeting.
yeah,
Once a year, you bring everyone
yeah,
together. And so we were out at a fish and wildlife property in West Virginia for several days this past week. And I mean, I do think that our flexibility is great. And I think I've made the most of it and it's worked for me. But then, you bring everyone together and you actually meet people and they become humans.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
there is something really important to that. And I found so much value in our office site meetings. So trying to figure out, I myself I work through 4 out of 5 days a week from home, and making sure that I'm not like sinking into, my shell and still getting out is definitely something you got to be aware of.
It is really interesting. There's multiple days where I'm like, did I brush my teeth today? I don't know if I did.
Yes, same, literally same. And then I'm walking around and I'm like, I'm still in my pajamas. It's 2 in the afternoon. What is happening?
It is fantastic. Like anytime I'm like, oh my God, I gotta wear a belt today. What is happening? I gotta put on
I know.
hard shoes. We just hired someone new, and it's really funny because her first week, or her first day and her first week, she goes, I have so many blisters. I'm like, she goes, because she has to go. She was in the office. We were in the office like to onboard her and get her, whatever.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Oh, I can't. I don't. I know this is not a problem. I'm just whining. I wearing these shoes. I haven't worn shoes like this in years, because she was working in a different job where she was entirely remote for the entire time. So like now she was in the office. She's like, I don't know what to do with these shoes."
No, absolutely. I mean, I even coming from, I was in person a little bit more when I was in LA, but now that I'm in DC, I'm only in person once a week, but I take the metro there. So also
Yeah.
all the heels I used to wear when I drove in LA, that does not work when I'm going to the metro, and the pants that I need heels to wear because of how long they're,
Yeah, yeah,
it's like I had to
yeah,
totally
yeah.
change my mindset and getting used to this, even though it is only one day a week. And the range of what people wear at a place like the Department of Energy is everything from full three-piece suit to
Really?
woodsy casual. So
Woodsy casual, the Evermore era,
yes.
like just coming straight out of that. Like we're just all coming straight out with robes and all ready to go.
Yes, yes, would be fine. Camping would be fine at the DOE. It seems to be interchangeable. It's a
Got it.
self-selecting group.
Got it. Cool, cool. I like now I'm really enjoying this conversation because we're going chronologically backward in time. And that brings us to the point of you actually working in our office as a graduate associate. And you were, and I told you then, and I'll tell you now, you were better than many full-time employees. You were a part-time graduate student who was doing work in admission with us and was just so productive and so effective. And I'm still very, very thankful for all the work that you did because back in those days, I didn't have a full staff, and now I've got. You were there when we started growing the staff. I
Mm-hmm.
think was you were actually that last one that we had,
Mm-hmm.
and then we started bringing in more people, which was really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like working in admission
You
when you look
know,
back on it? Because you
it's
alluded to
so
it, that you alluded to the fact, sorry, this is the transitionary conversation. You alluded to it that you were naturally involved in Ramble and recruiting and onboarding new people. And that, I think that was alluding to the admission stuff.
yes. And so it's so funny because you don't realize how much the experiences that are non-technical, that are not actually like, leading towards the scientific aspects of your degree or your career, how influential they are. And I
Mm,
mean, I refer back to my time in recruitment and admission and working with students at USC and prospective students all the time. I mean, it's one of my
mm.
most treasured experiences because you remember I did that job instead of doing an internship that
Yeah,
summer with
yeah,
that was a technical internship.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm so glad I did because it was the types of skills I learned. I mean, communication, like we kind of started the conversation with, communication is just the cornerstone of everything. And
Hmm.
I learned so much about how to communicate and how to work with different types of people and all of those types of things from my time in recruiting and admission. And it kind of gave me an enjoyment of talking to people and just getting to know people for no other purpose than just like learning about them and understanding just more about how people operate and things like that. And so I really loved the DEIA work that we did. We're trying to get more underrepresented groups to apply and come to engineering, and I'm super proud that y'all hit parity right at the end of my time there
Oh,
for
that's right.
incoming
Yeah.
undergraduate class. And when I started, it was 36% my first year at USC of
Hmm.
women. So,
Hmm.
so going from 36% women to 50% in the 5 years that I was there was a huge accomplishment for, admission in the engineering school. And I was glad I played a part of that.
You did.
So I look back on it fondly. And now when I am doing any type of recruiting for technical jobs, I always have an eye towards like, oh, well, you were a security guard at Disneyland. I bet you have a lot of skills from that. That's someone who, may have worked in a lab or an internship, has a different set of skills. And I'd love to know more about that. And I had lots of hires who kind of had those different types of backgrounds because I just see so much value in that. So yeah, and honestly, it was fun. A little bit of talking to people, going to events, I can't get mad about that. Talking about myself.
Yeah. Do you remember? So I'm remembering a very specific event that you helped with where you came with us to the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And you came with me and Stacy was relatively new at the time, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
We when I went with you, we went with Michael.
Was it Michael? Okay.
Yes.
I thought, am I
We may
getting,
have done something with Stacy too.
I'm getting a little confused. Okay, so you tell me what you remember, because I'm remembering a very specific event where we had confusion on the rental car, and I let you guys go back to the hotel from our event space, and then like I didn't have a ride, and and then they had to come back because the keys were in someone else's purse, and then like there was this whole like, do you remember that?
I
It
feel
was
like
the
I vaguely do, but then I'm like, are you implanting a memory in my brain? I don't
Well, it was
know.
an alumni event. Remember, we had like this offsite alumni event in San Francisco.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Now I do remember the offsite alumni
And
event.
I don't
Yes.
remember the
The
details, but I just
panel.
remember the fact that like you guys had to go back to set up the regular USC event because we were coming from the alumni event. And then I had to go like take the alumni to lunch. And then I was going to Uber back over and meet you guys like midstream at the USC event. But like you left and like the keys were back. I don't remember what it was, but then someone had to like, it was like a rental car to an Uber back. Like it was this horrible triangle
Keys
where I'm
in a
like,
purse sounds very me. So it's literally the other night I left my keys at home. I locked myself out and I had to go to someone else's house to get the keys. That was a 10-minute walk and come back. So that sounds like me. Well, do you remember when we were in the Bay Area, but right before that, I had a burn on my leg. Do you remember
yeah,
that?
that
And it
sounds
was
familiar.
gnarly because I had been steaming my suit the night
Yes,
before.
yes.
And I was talking on the phone to someone with headphones and I spilled the steamed water and my leg, I mean, it was crispy chicken skin. I still have the scar. It was
Oh
so bad. And
man.
I just remember wrapping it and walking around in this suit that was too tight on my calf, like trying to do this event.
Oh my God. Yeah, I do remember that because it was like, because I don't think you actually told me until the event was over. And I'm like, you've been doing this entire time this way? Like, why are you here?
I mean, what was I going to do? I wanted to go. You probably would have told me I didn't have to, but I wanted to.
Yeah, I probably would have had you. Yeah, just kick it in the room.
Well, and you guys were like, you didn't go to urgent care for this? And I was like,
Yeah.
well, it was the night before. I didn't have time. It worked out. My leg's still here.
um, yeah, no, say yeah, I forgot you were there for the hiring and the onboarding of like both Michael and Stacy,
Yep.
who
Yep.
both no longer work with us anymore.
Really, Stacy too.
Yeah, Stacy left in December.
Okay. Okay. Well, now I did see you guys were hiring, so now you got another new trainee.
Not train. I mean, she's a professional. She's worked in college for over 20 years, and so
Mm-hmm.
but she's new to us and new to admission. But she's
Sure.
actually used to work in the Viterbi school like 20 something years ago, and so
Mm.
she's kind of a return to the workforce type situation, but has done some really cool stuff in career work. She's done stuff in wellness. She's done stuff in student leadership, and she's also done a lot of independent private college counseling on the side. So
Mhm.
Brooke is fantastic. And so she actually, I was just messaging her yesterday. She's been like training. She's been working out for like 3 weeks and she's been training and kind of like soaking up the presentations. And so she
Mhm.
has to give her first presentation on Monday. So I think she's kind of freaking out a little bit.
Are you gonna be sitting there watching her?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So like, I'm like, well, here you go. I'm just gonna be sitting in the back, and so I know that's not necessarily helpful. That I'm like staring at her giving a presentation, but we'll see how she does.
Well, what about you as far as like the way that you guys do admission? And do you feel like the pandemic, of course, it's changed things like the way that you can contact people and things like that. But I mean, for better or for worse, we have way more remote work and interviews and things like that. But I also try to be aware of how, Zoom cannot be ideal for certain people with accessibility
Right,
issues or,
right, right, right,
things
right.
like that.
Well, so everything is uh, everything's a give and take. Everything's a pro and a con, and I think wherever we are now, regardless of any complaining I might do over the next couple minutes, is way better than we ever were in the past. When the pandemic hit, we at that particular year we had just so that was what 4 years ago today ish actually,
Mhm.
which is really weird.
Yeah.
We
Happy
had
anniversary.
exactly, yes, we made it. We're alive. Um, we had just wrapped making scholarship decisions.
Mm.
We had just wrapped that up. We had gone through all of the in-person scholarship interviews. We had literally just wrapped up those decisions. The rumors of what was happening, things, the flu, it's not is whatever. Like I don't know, we might whatever, and then like we get this email like you can't come back, and like we're done. And so that day we had a little huddle, and it was like, okay, send that email, get that out, get the decisions out. And then we actually came back in on Monday in masks and didn't come anywhere near each other and packed up
Mhm.
everything. And basically had everything packed up to go out to our mail house because we had all these materials that we needed to like give out.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, get everything out of the office. And then we walked out and I never stepped back into the office for 2 years. ish around there. And then we went 100% virtual on everything. And
Wow.
coincidental at the time, we had just shifted from desktop computers
Hmm.
to laptops 2 months prior.
Like
And
docking.
yeah, and it's like, and so like literally, it's like, and how like novel this idea is, but our office, it was like very old school, and so it's like we got these new laptops. So everybody goes home with a laptop, and like, well, thank God you got those, because if we
Hmm.
didn't, we would have been shut down entirely. But like, take home, so you're on your laptop, you're functional, get it set up. We ended up buying the this microphone. I still have it. And like my podcasting stuff, like this is all I do now. You saw the old setup, but I haven't actually. I
Hmm.
mean, I had a new one at that time, which you may have seen. It was like a
Hmm.
big deal. And then I haven't used that since. It's still sitting in the office because it's all set up for like a physical one-on-one type situation. But now we
Hmm.
do all the interviews on Zoom. But we Zoom at the time, we had just USC had just contracted Zoom like a few months prior. Like oddly, like we had this thing called Zoom. Let's
Yeah, I didn't
try
even know what
that.
it was.
Yeah, we had USC had literally just like in a rare bout of foresight had Zoom installed. And so we're like, well, let's try that. Let's set that up. And then we ended up doing all of our Explore USC over virtual. And then we shifted and created all new quote unquote virtual info sessions, which replaced the Meet USC program.
Hmm.
Um, and again, at a sense of, amazing coincidence, we started. I don't know if you ever used Slate. Did you use Slate?
Slate. I don't think so.
Yeah, you'd remember it if you did. This entirely custom CRM solution. So all of our
Oh, you
email,
just started it.
yeah. So like that just started.
Mm.
And so now we have online reservation systems, virtual event systems. We exploded. We were having events with 100 people 3 days a week. And so when you think about DEIA issues and accessibility in particular, where Zoom is not necessarily there, the other argument, the other side of that is that we were now accessible to way more people.
Mhm.
And so,
Yes.
whereas before, to learn more about a program, you'd have to visit.
Mhm.
Now you don't have to visit. Yeah, we were in your living room, we were in your bedroom, and we were talking to you directly and regularly, and we had events. And so we had this like big expansion of eyeballs and volume and names of people that would go back and forth. And you cut to today, which is like a really interesting idea, is that we transitioned back to on campus. And the minute we went to on campus stuff, that exploded because everyone was anxious to get. And I was honestly, I wasn't sure it was going to go. Like we set up a schedule. We're like, let's see how many people will make reservations. And then it just kind of blew up like out of control. We had to add more events. And so then we started running 6 on campus events per week. So we no longer did Meet USCs, but we took the idea of an info session and it, it was insane. We were like that summer when we came back, we had 300 to 400 people visiting Viterbi every week
Wow.
because it was 50 to 75 people per event. So like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, AM, PM sessions, just nonstop. And we went all summer long. And then we started doing more virtual events. We had some really cool, the students really came in, awesome VSAs came in with these virtual like student panels that were like every other week on different topics. And that went really big. When we came back to in person, all that stuff kind of stopped getting viewership. Like people just stopped signing up because at that point, Zoom fatigue became really real for a high school student and they didn't want to sign up for those things. But now we're at this point where we have this really, I think, healthy balance of lots of in-person stuff, lots of virtual things when available, because I think it's less impact, on a student of, yeah, I'll sign up to listen to you talk on a Thursday
Mhm.
night for a minute, and we'll get some breakthrough there. But our in-person stuff is really it, and it's really cool. And then we rotate around in the office. I'm still there relatively frequently, but we rotate around and see what we need to do, and we cover it. And we have a Zoom phone number now, so when someone calls our office, it actually just rings on our phone. Which
That's another thing I was wondering. Oh my gosh. So
yeah,
there's no one screening your calls?
Oh, it's so great. It's so great. And I think you remember some of the issues, but without, without talking about anything specifically, you remember the issues. They're not there anymore because we answer our own phone and we kind of rotate around on who did it. So I can I at any moment I can see phone traffic and I can see who called and who called them back. And we can also like if we really ever needed to, we can get like transcripts of phone calls, like which is a
Hmm.
beautiful, beautiful thing. So it's it's all the stuff that you you were aware of back in the
I
day.
answered phones.
You answered phones, but all those complications are
Yeah.
gone. They're just
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And it's a dedicated number to just us. It's not who are you and
Combined.
what are you doing? Yeah, there's a whole other conversation I can have with you later about a complete giant reorganization that took place coincidentally, like 6 months before the pandemic.
Mhm.
Everything changed for us right before everything changed, which was a really interesting dynamic. So,
Yeah, well, and another, lucky thing I had about working for my consulting firm or working for Ramble, when the pandemic hit was that we worked across several offices. So we were already pretty online, as far as, comfortable with
mhm.
doing those calls and things like that. But luckily or unluckily, I had a project, we shut down on a Friday. I had a project starting that Monday in person, and
Mm,
we are mandated by the government to clean it up still. And
yeah,
so, in one hand, it was scary because it was the wild, wild west of even though we were
yeah.
working outside, we were still full mask,
You didn't
gloves,
know,
six
yeah,
feet.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then, but that was at least a touch point as the years went on where I could still see people and like
yeah.
interact and be able to be out in a relatively, as we learned, safe environment. And so that was another positive thing of working in engineering and specifically working outside was being able to kind of get past some of those isolation because for me I personally didn't see anyone outside of going out to the field for months and months and months. I didn't see anyone at home. I was living alone, and so that was my time to the grocery store and the drillers. Those were my best friends.
Where were you living in LA, by the way?
I was in Hollywood, and then I moved more into West Hollywood. I lived in the same place when I was working in admission. I lived there for like 3 years, and then I moved a little bit more west to like Sunset and where were we? Sunset and La Brea
That's
for
where
the
I
last
lived.
like year and a
That's
half.
where I lived at that age.
I know
Did I tell you
you
about
were
that?
giving me recommendations,
Oh,
and I
that's
looked
right.
them up, and they were all closed.
They
So
were all close. That's how old it
I'm
was.
not
Hey,
kidding.
go to this place. It's really cool. Nah, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, you made fun of me for calling Santa Monica Boulevard the two, which I did quickly learn is that not anything anyone does. So you were
That's
right.
it's not the two.
You got me there.
Yeah, these are things I do not remember. I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean,
It sounds
I
right, but
will.
I don't remember it.
I mean, I did love, even though I was like quote unquote commuting to USC for that last when I was in grad school that one year, I did love living in, the Hollywood, West Hollywood area of LA. It is, moving from South Central, I thought I was always going to go to downtown, but LA is great. And I think that, I get why people like to kind of stay there. I think West Hollywood is the best neighborhood.
Yeah, everything has its pros. And also it has its, I think I told you this at the time. It has its pros for whatever age you're in. I know someone right now my age who's living there, and I'm like, how do you do that? Like I can't
Hmm.
do that. I need a very quiet suburb. It's just
Hmm.
very, very different lifestyle right now.
I mean, you got
Um,
to tell me though a little bit. I need a little tiny update on McKay.
of course. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Happy to give you an update on McKay.
How is the most intelligent person I've ever met? Seriously, I'm not kidding.
Really?
She's just like, I mean, she just blew me away. I mean, I don't know if intelligent, like I just thought she was like amazing. Like she just
Well,
seemed so mature.
what, 5 years ago now?
Yeah, she was like what, 3?
Yeah, she was 3 at the
She
time.
didn't seem like it, but yeah.
Yeah, she was 3 at the time. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a very kind compliment. I will definitely tell Charity about that. And I don't know if I'll tell McKay because she'll be like, yeah, that's me. That's pretty much how she'll run. McKay is doing great. She is in 3rd grade. She is, let's see, here's some highlights. She is a huge Swiftie. Um, and she is obsessed with Taylor Swift and is obsessed with cats. It's kind of an
Okay.
every moment of her life type
You
situation.
had just got strawberry.
I did just get strawberry. We did get strawberry at that time. Yes. And I
Strawberry was a
hate,
kitten.
yes, yes. Strawberry's still here. It's just still my nemesis. And not good. Yes. So, wow, great memory. So McKay's great. She's in third grade. She is, let's see, what are some recent things? She just, started a after school coding program, which is exciting, where she's coding video games. I mean, this sounds super impressive, but when you look at it, it's like, okay, it's drag and
Well,
drop, but it's still cool. She's in this thing, but she's doing that. She just got quote unquote accepted, which it just means we were like next on the list. It doesn't mean like she cleared some sort of hurdle, but she will start Lego robotics on Tuesday. So the entry level Lego robotics section of that, which is really funny because I'm always on the other end of that, where I see the students go through like, first and all the Lego League competitions.
you're really priming her for to be a little engineer
You
over
have no
here.
idea. So those first, going back to the other conversation where I said when we first went back in person, I brought her. And now every couple months, whenever she has a break, she always comes with me to do the presentations. And now she says, it's not really true, but she says she can lead the Makerspace tour.
Yes, McKay.
She always wants to talk about the makerspace and what happens in the makerspace. And there's not a lot of detail to what she talks about, but she's very excited to show off the 3D printers because she wants to talk about how she has a 3D printer, because she has a 3D printer in her room that she's very excited about, even though her 3D printer is like, this big. It's very, very
She's not
tiny.
making the same things.
She's not making the same things, but she likes to go talk about the 3D printing room because it is very, she has that connection to it. So,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, she's as precocious as she will ever be, and that is a good and a bad thing on every level. There's a lot of like there's multiple moments where you find yourself telling her, and this is, I think every parent goes through this, where you find yourself saying like, because I said so, and her sense of like, my body, my choice, everything about her is like, but I, as a person, don't want to do these things, and I have a right to say what I want to do or not. And I'm like, and then you have an out of body experience where you're like, I really appreciate everything you're saying, but get in the goddamn shower.
It's still a no from me.
It's still a no from me, dog. Like it's very much that back and forth. My wife and I have these constant conversations where we're like debating with an 8-year-old, and we love everything she's saying, but it's like it's in the wrong conversation. Like this is not what we're
Yes.
dealing with right now.
And I remember she would remember like everything. She had such a great memory, so I couldn't like lie to her or say something. Because she'd be like, "No, you said." And I'm like, "You're not supposed to remember that."
Yeah. Welcome to my world. This happens all the time. Last week, you said that on Thursday, I might be able to have more screen time because I would be able to complete X, Y, and Z by this point in time. And I've done that. And I'm like, oh, I was just trying to get you off that conversation at that moment. Like, I don't know.
You're thinking short term, but she's not.
Right. I mean, the funny thing is like she's reading like crazy right now, which is not irregular for this generation of kids. Like for me, it was very, I don't remember reading a book, honestly, ever. But she like literally, she just in the last 2-3 months, she finished a book series that on her bookshelf is, I'm not joking, it's this wide.
Oh,
Like
I
it's
love
it's
that.
7 books that are this thick. And it's like she just like rifled through them. And I'm like, whose kid are you? Like, I don't understand who this is. This is a crazy world. But yeah, no, she's great. And so I will tell her that you said hello. And I'm sure, and again, I'm sure she remembers you. She goes through
Oh
runs with,
my gosh. I
she goes
love
through runs with
that.
people.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to our conversation of like, what's important in life and seeing things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I
Mm-hmm.
just I love hearing that. I mean, that's the future, right? She is.
Yeah, I think so. I think she thinks so.
She knows so.
She
So
she knows so. That's exactly right. It's very much an interesting bout. But yeah, we're hitting that point of like, oh, like you can see puberty coming. Like you could just see it. Like you could see, like the other day, I think she said something like, Dad, no, that is not on trend. And I know it's not a puberty related element, but like just this growth of like whatever I told her to wear, or like, no, don't wear that. And she's like, no, that is not on trend. I'm like, you're in third grade. Slow down. Like, I don't know what you're dealing with right now.
I mean, I think like it does seem like kids feel older as far as like, getting
Yep.
makeup and like
Oh
seeing
my
themselves
God.
in a screen all the time.
The conversations, my wife tells these stories of her brownie group, and like they were, I don't know, going somewhere for a meeting, and the conversations in the car were all about skincare routines.
I didn't even
And
know what that was.
we're like, what are we talking about? And like everyone at Christmas this year got some sort of makeup set. It was a very
Mhm.
weird thing. So it's I most of the time, and this is exactly like you start to understand dad memes. Like you start to understand like the overall like why dads become dads. It's like after a while, I'm just like walking away slowly and not involved. And I'm silent and I'll sit on the couch and I will wait to be told what to do, and then I will do those things. Speaking of which, uh you always talked about being raised by your dad, and your dad and it was a cop, right? And in
Yep.
Bakersfield, and had these ideas. How's your family? How's everything going with all this?
Yeah, my family's great. My parents are both still in Bakersfield. My dad is retired, but the ethos of, being a cop's daughter still lives very much within me, especially living in a city like DC where people are always talking about safety and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
But I mean, it is definitely, especially coming to a place like DC that you asked if I was political. My answer would be no, that I don't consider my role political. But I am, one of the things I want to implement in my time here is sort of like my mindset from where I grew up. And as I'm getting older and hopefully maturing, my dad and I actually drove from California
really?
to DC to move here.
How was that?
You know what? It was great. It was my idea. We
Yeah.
did a humongous moving truck and then towed my Corolla behind it all the way across,
How
like a
long did it
dozen
take?
states. We did a week.
Wow.
And something I didn't calculate is, so luckily most of our stops were in the beginning. We saw the Grand Canyon. I cried when I saw it for the first time. We watched the sunrise, which was really beautiful, and Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs, and just different areas in the West that I had never been to, and that was incredible. But on like day two, we realized all of a sudden the time changed. It jumped an hour, and I was like, wait a minute. I did not calculate the fact that we were going to lose 3 hours of driving through this trip. And let me tell you, driving with a huge truck like that takes forever. And
Yeah, it's
so
slow.
the timing is also not the same as driving a regular car. And so after we had saw those first few sites, we had ideas. We're going to go through Nashville, all of this. And then you're halfway through and you're like, let's just drive. Let's just keep
Just
going.
yeah,
So we
it was
powered
it
through.
was like a vacation sightseeing, and then all of a sudden you're like, no, we just need to get this done.
Yes, immediately we're like, should we power through? Yeah, changed our route. We're like, we're not going through any more cities. We are just finding a hotel and stopping and staying there. And it needs to be one that has a big enough parking lot to turn around this humongous thing that
Oh my
we're
gosh.
driving. But
Oh
it
my
was a great
gosh.
time. And my dad's side of the family's from Kansas. And so we drove through
Oh,
Kansas and went to like their a family home that they have in Quinter, Kansas, a town of like 500 people. And so I met some of the Jamisons, as we're called in Kansas.
the
We're not the
Jamisons.
Jamisons. Yes. I'm serious. So that was really great. It was a great time. And honestly, it was a really great time for us to bond. And, now that I'm older, I don't spend as much concentrated time with my parents. It might
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
few hours or, a limited amount of time. And so to really be able to kind of build up our relationship and really understand, we have very differing views, especially after everything that happened in 2020 with the pandemic and the protests, trying to
Yeah,
work
yeah, yeah.
through our different perspectives. It was really, really positive for that. I feel like now I'm a master communicator with people who think differently than me. But it was a really good time. I'm so glad we did it.
Well, good. That's awesome. That's good to hear.
Mhm.
Do you remember the idea of applying to college? And obviously the environment has always been a big passion point of yours, but was environmental engineering always the thing? I mean, when you think about wanting to make a difference, what were you going through at that time period?
Yeah, so when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for college, I was honestly kind of caught between my whole life. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And so, especially my dad working in law enforcement, he always thought I would be a good like district attorney.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
you kind of think that you're going to do, and I am argumentative. So you think that that's something that you're going to pursue. But once I was in high school and I took environmental science and calculus, those were two of the first classes that I took where I was like, in awe. Like I really enjoyed both of them. And calculus was the first time I really felt like math was being applied to things that mattered. And it was the first time I never before that would have said I liked math, but it just totally opened up my eyes to what that means. And
Mhm.
combining that with my interest in environmental science, kind of just picked environmental engineering because it made sense on a whim. I didn't really know exactly what that meant. And in hindsight, you can do a lot of work in climate change and the environmental space without being an environmental engineer, which is something I tried to push in admission.
Mhm.
But that was kind of what led me to that choice. I knew I wanted to do engineering just in general, that the efficiencies and those types of things, and frankly, like kind of good job security, I
Yeah.
wanted to do something and something where I could say after I did it, people would be like, oh, engineering. Like it sounds silly, but like I wanted a little bona fides behind it. And
Yeah.
so those were kind of the things I was looking at. And once I actually started environmental engineering at USC, what I wanted to do with it changed. Like I started off wanting to do a petroleum engineering minor because I'm from an oil town. I got a
Mhm.
scholarship from the American Petroleum Institute to wanting to work in nonprofits, philanthropy, and volunteerism, and doing that as my minor to, now what I've ended up doing more public policy related work. But at the time, I realized that I really loved the classes I was taking in environmental engineering. And so, regardless of what path I was eventually going to take, as long as I enjoyed what I was doing in the classes that, and I had a somewhat of a career path, that was kind of what led me to stick with it. So I stayed with it all 4 years from freshman year on.
If you could go back to talking to senior year Bria Jamison,
Mhm.
to the Jamisons, if you go back talking to Bria, senior year Bria, what would you tell her? What were the things you were worried about then versus where you are now?
I was really worried. I think a lot of people can relate to. I was really worried too about wanting to get out of my town and just never come back. And I really wanted to make a difference in the world. And I would still say to an extent I feel that way, but I just remember feeling like I really want to pick a path that is going to set me up for success. But success in the way that like I'm going to do big things and do important things. And so I wish that I could kind of go back and talk to myself and at least say, I think it is still grand and noble to want to do big things. I still want to do big things now, but also recognizing that you can have a really big impact in the smaller different areas of your life. You can have a conversation with someone and impact their life. You can work on a project that seems small, but they can actually have big impact. So I kind of wish that I had a better understanding of kind of the things that seem smaller in life, understanding that those can have big impacts too. And your definition of doing good and making a difference can kind of change over time. So I think at the time I felt all of these needs of like, I need to become president, and that's going to be the only way I can actually make a difference in the world. So I think that was something I was kind of stressed about. And honestly, when it comes to admission, I did not get into all the schools I applied to. I didn't end up taking the path that I thought was what I wanted when I started that whole process.
Yeah.
And now looking back, obviously, of course, I feel like things worked out, but I do really feel like I wish I had just been less stressed about it. Like things will work out the way they are,
Yeah.
and you as a person, you'll always make, at least I know that I will always make a situation good, so it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter what I'm walking into, I will make it successful. So those are kind of the things that I was stressed about.
That's awesome. That's really
Mhm.
cool. Um, you've been very generous with your time. I don't want to keep you for too much longer. But before I get into my final thing, I have one final thing for you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you about? Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I guess one thing that I didn't really think about when I was kind of moving into like the way that the government works is I think
Hmm.
a lot of people don't think about like the federal government
No, not at
and
all.
its role in our lives. And I think the one thing that we didn't really talk about as much is just I guess kind of like how it all works and how when you pay taxes to the state or the federal government, Congress makes decisions on what happens with those taxes. And then
Hmm.
basically what I do right now in my role at the Department of Energy is taking that money and giving it to different projects. It could be LA County Sanitation or Ramble, a consulting firm, and sort of
Right.
implementing that funding in research and development. And so I think like when people have a better understanding of the way that all of that works and how the way you vote is also, really important. I guess that's the one thing that that I wish I had thought about more just, moving through my life now as an adult, is kind of understanding all of these forces that affect what we do all the time and what we can do to affect them. So whether that's voting or even choosing career paths that kind of, relate to that. I just think that it's just this whole world that kind of controls our lives that we don't really think about. So yeah, I guess maybe civic engagement that's my one thing
That's
that I
it's
recommend, especially to young people.
Yeah. No, I think that I have a few thoughts. It's like you only hear about the big company moves because they're big marketing like splashes on like a lot of, I think now
Mhm.
these days a lot of people believe that, whether it's right or wrong, that companies are ruling the world because they're making these decisions and advancing technologies. And so people just kind of just only see that. That's the only visible part about that. And then when anybody talks about government, it's through this hyper political lens
Mhm.
that is only the fringes of the actual functioning government of what actually happens the way you described it. And too often or not, people think that there's like this idea of nefarious acts in place. This idea like, oh, the government this, the government that, and everybody wants to get upset about taxes no matter what you do, because obviously, yeah, you make money and it doesn't work, but the understanding of what civilization actually is, or being part of a civic society,
Mhm.
this is all how we support this whole giant system that we have working, and everybody loves to complain when it doesn't work, and they don't understand that the reason it doesn't work is because it either wasn't funded appropriately or was given the proper support. And in some situations, it just wasn't right. It was an older program that we need to fix. And so,
Mhm.
um, yeah, a lot of people don't think of that. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, and I mean it kind of goes back to our conversation how I mentioned that the newer staff at my firm were kind
Mm,
of pushing me and my values, and I a lot of the time find myself as the youngest person in the room at, in various different situations and meetings, and pushing, knowing my strength of my youthful perspective is a strength. It is something unique, and I,
yeah,
especially a lot of your listeners being high school students and college students and early career people, young people. I just think that is a power. And I'm so impressed by Gen Z. And so I hope that we see kind of more of them injecting themselves into society and making a difference, because they also have, an important perspective. So
absolutely. Absolutely. So, as is tradition with some of our most recent interviews, I always like to end with a round of lightning questions. Are you ready for a round of lightning round questions?
let's do it.
Okay, ready. Here we go. Texting or talking?
Talking.
Favorite day of the week?
Friday.
Favorite city in the US besides the one you live in?
Chicago.
Yeah, me too. Nickname your parents used to call you?
Sissy Ruru Lulu Bell.
I'm sorry, one more time?
My dad, he still calls me Sissy, Ruru, Lulu, Belle, but Rue for short.
Wow. That's impressive. I like that a lot. Last song you specifically went to your device, searched for, and hit play on. Like it wasn't like it just came up, but like you actually, I need to listen to this song.
Texas Hold'em by Beyonce. I feel very strongly marrying two things. I love country music and Beyonce. I am gonna die for this album.
I feel like that's Bakersfield talking. Like I feel like this is you. If I remember correctly, the side note, you were really into like electronic music. Like you were all in like the festivals and stuff like that. And
I
so is
was.
was so no longer are.
Not as much as I was before. That was like I do still enjoy that music, but I'm bringing it back. I've had
It's a
a resurgence of my Bakersfield identity. I'm serious.
I hear you. I hear
My
you.
birthday was country themed this year. Like I'm doing
Wow. So
it.
this is just at the right time, the right place. All
It
right, cool.
is.
Cool. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Every language in the world.
Favorite holiday?
International Women's Day.
Ooh, that was just the other day.
Uh-huh.
How long does it take you to get ready?
It depends on how ready I'm getting, anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours.
Let's say you're going to work.
Including breakfast and everything in the morning, I try to wake up 2 hours before I need to leave.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
Oh, I don't give myself high marks, maybe a 4. I gotta be honest.
Fill in the blank. Taylor Swift is.
Very talented.
Wow, you were like holding so much stuff back there.
No, if you aren't a Swiftie, then they'll come for you. So I love her, but I'm not a Swiftie, so I need to be careful.
I wish we actually released the videos of this just to show your face, but we're not going to do that. At what age do you want to retire?
Oh, I'm 28. I mean, I'm like, how quick can I not do labor for money? Like,
Right,
what?
right.
I'm trying to figure it out right now.
Invisibility or super strength?
Invisibility.
Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
I think it depends on your moral stance. I would never.
You would never. You would
No, I'm a
never.
flexitarian now, so I would definitely.
Wait. I'm sorry. Flexitarian. This is a new word for me.
Well, it shouldn't be because I got that word from what's the dining hall in the village? That dining hall.
McCarthy?
Yeah.
Or no, yeah, whatever that. No, it's in McCarthy. I don't know what it's called, but go ahead. Yeah.
That dining hall, at least when it started, was when I was still at USC. They called themselves flexitarian, like mostly vegetarian, but not like exclusively. That's kind of how I consider myself. So I stole that from USC.
I've never been in that space. No, I've been in it once when it was under construction. It was right when it was opening. That's the first time I walked in there, and I've never been in there since. So I don't
I
know.
only went there for like VSA when we were, as part of the admission events. So I was
Oh
like,
yeah, like the student lunches, free food. Awesome. Bria, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I'm certain everyone's going to really love hearing the story.
Thank you so much. And it was great to catch up and kind of hear how things have changed. Wishing you guys the best in your, continuing to kind of make a difference in engineering. I think it's awesome.
Absolutely. I'm going to put you on an email with Becky in case you happen to be free and you guys could catch up. And I'm sure Becky can give you all of the other background stories of things that have happened that have been different.
Perfect. And yeah, definitely pass along my thoughts to McKay and Charity.
I will. Thank you so much. See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome back, everybody. Paul, I just want to take a moment for this absolutely stacked episode that you just gave us. I'm personally I'm jealous because I feel like Bria seems like this incredible person and you got to work with her so much.
Yes.
Like I want Bria on the podcast. I feel like she should be here in the intro outro with us right now. Like I want to chat with her.
I'm sure she'd want to. Yeah, I'm sure she'd want to. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So what were some of your favorite parts of the conversation?
I mean, I think it's fascinating so many times in all of our episodes, a lot of our engineers go on into what are kind of with broad strokes being called consulting roles. And a pessimist will say, well, then they're no longer engineers. And every consultant we've ever had on refutes that quite quickly and talks about how engineers are being brought in to various companies to solve engineering problems for them. And that's essentially what they do. But this is even a different type of consultant in that she was an environmental consultant, especially working with Ramble, which is not like a consultant with like Deloitte or Accenture or EY. This is an environmental consultant where she is a hardcore technical environmental engineer. She talked a lot about her field work and fixing problems, not only for cities, but for companies and figuring out how to remediate all those types of problems that are out there. And some of those remediation techniques that take, decades, if not will be going on for our lifetime to fix problems that they discovered and how to actually go about making the world cleaner and the technology that's involved. And the technology that my favorite part was when she talked about how some of them can be, complex chemical solutions that need to remediate things that are in the groundwater and the soil. And others are, and I forget the word that she used, but it was the planting of the poplar trees. As long as they did planted this row of poplar trees, it allowed for the roots to go down to filter out any of the chemicals before it went into the running water or the groundwater underneath. And I'm paraphrasing all of that, and none of that is accurate
Hmm.
exactly. But and then retaining walls and all this other stuff that had to do of solving complex problems.
Hmm.
And how when someone thinks about environmental engineering, it is hard to understand what environmental engineering is because it is so complex and it involves the idea of cleaning and making the world a better place, and how that has transitioned to her current role at as a science and technology policy fellow with the Department of Energy, with the work that she's doing there. And it's really exciting to see her transition these ideas, continue to grow professionally, follow passions, discover new passions, and also more specifically, we talked about some personal things in there about her always wanting to control things and how she's learning to grow. Yeah, exactly. How
I
she's
raised my
learning
hand for everyone listening.
how she's learning to control how she's learning not to try to control everything as she
Mhm.
kind of moves from one part of her career to another. Which is also fascinating because our next it's making me think of our next alumni recorded episode that we'll release in a couple of weeks, and how that particular person has moved between careers rather fluidly. And it's a different personality that I also find in engineers, which is different than this. But now that's a whole
Mhm.
other side conversation. Anyways, I love Bria. She does great stuff, and it's really exciting to hear her talk about the stuff she does and see how much she's worked.
Exciting. Well, I'm sure the listeners will enjoy it just as much as we did. Yeah, any witty banter? What's on our agenda?
And I don't know. I am
Um,
so overwhelmed right now. It's such a busy time.
I agree. I actually just started taking like this is my side hustle, graduation photos.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I had my first session last
Oh,
night
did you
and it went very well. It was
at Golden Hour?
golden hour, beautiful. Like campus was pretty empty, which is nice. Like the key I've learned now is like any weekend at this point is mobbed.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if you go during like when you think students are just getting out of class, you can squeeze in some good lighting pictures with less people in the background. But yeah, so that's starting now. So life is about to get crazy, but crazy fun.
good.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, it's we're in the heat of it. This is the admitted student season, but at the same time, it's when juniors and younger students are starting to look. And so all of our events on campus for prospective students, and I'll use that term loosely regarding people that have not yet applied, we're packed. We've got,
Mhm.
where we average about probably 25 to 30 visiting folks on any given slow week. We got like 250, 300 visiting folks. And if anyone out there wants to register for one of our upcoming Viterbi visit experiences, if you're looking to learn more about the programs, go to viterbiadmission.usc.edu/visit or /events. And that will give you all the possible opportunities that are there for high school juniors, high school sophomores, anyone that's learning to look to learn a little bit more, transfer students, and people are looking to learn more about the transfer process and get some transfer advisement. We do that in these larger sessions, and those are virtual. There's no need to come to campus. We just want to be able to give you the information that you need, and those are virtual sessions. We have a number of those every other week booked for the next several weeks, all available on our website as well, because we know we have a lot of students that are going to start figuring out the transfer plan over the next year. And then admitted student events are going on. So then I'm going to be getting on to a lot of planes in the near future. So next week,
Do do you remember
I'll
when we were in London last year?
I
Last
know. So
admitted
I'm doing that program again. I'll be there again.
Can I come with?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I can't pay for you to come with, but if you were going to be there again, that's fine. That's right. Because you were studying abroad in London. I was going to bring that
Hmm.
up the other day. We were in that session, and we didn't touch on the fact that we were there together.
Yeah, yeah, it was a very special moment. I think all admitted students events are just so full of excitement. I think it's
Hmm.
totally worth like traveling to wherever, coming in person, just like meeting other students that you could be going to school with and getting a sense of what USC students are like. So I'm personally very excited for those events coming up in April.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. I'm gonna be in Houston on Tuesday. I'm gonna be in Denver on Wednesday.
Oh, I love Denver. I can give you Denver airport Rex.
What are the Denver airport wrecks? Like,
So when
what's
I was
exciting about? So also Denver airport is so big and so many different terminals. So I'm curious what your wrecks are.
So I normally flew Delta in and out of Denver.
Good. Okay, I'm flying Delta.
But yes, so there's this one restaurant that I would stop at every single time. So I was working in Boulder this last summer. So I actually flew out of Denver quite a bit, like to go
Got it.
home and go visit friends and stuff. There's the best chicken Caesar wrap at this one place. It's called like Mercantile or something. You're like, if you walk past it, you'd see like it looks like a
Mercantile Dining and Provision.
one of those.
I
Yeah, it
just
looks.
looked it up.
Yeah, there's one that's sit down and then there's like a grab and go. So
I see it.
I would always get like a cappuccino and a grab and go chicken Caesar wrap. And it to this day remains my favorite airport food ever.
Okay. Okay.
So random.
I will check it out. Have we ever had this conversation about how snooty I am about airports now?
I
I
don't
don't think we
know.
have.
I don't think we have.
You would
I've
jump on it. You would jump on it
Mhm.
if I told you we had before. But like I now my staff does not like me at all. Um, in the last like 2-ish years,
Oh,
I've gotten to a
you're a lounge guy.
I'm a lounge guy.
You're
Yeah.
a
And
lounge
so
guy.
so I'm like, oh cool, commoner food. Yeah, sure.
No, honestly though, I
Um,
swear like this one is worth it. Normally when I'm traveling with my roommates, sometimes we'll be in lounges as well.
yeah.
This wrap is worth it.
Is it worth it? Okay.
It is worth like go there and then swing by. But yeah, actually it's funny. I was on our trip to spring break, we were flying Delta. I fly Delta
Mhm.
quite a bit, like home
Yes.
and whatever.
Me too. It's
Um
all Delta all the time.
yeah, for some reason. So I was upgraded to first class on our way to spring
What?
break.
What? For some reason, I feel like you're hiding the reason. Like you might know the reason.
No,
It was just luck.
I'm just a so I'm a medallion member, but not like super high or whatever. It's just kind of like
Okay.
classic. Um it was just kind of an empty flight apparently. So
Oh,
I
so you
was
just got bumped
upgraded.
up.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
got bumped up. So really no reason behind it, but my roommates were also like, "What the heck?" I like sent a picture of my like full
You're like,
meal.
have you seen, there's so many memes about like the first class, whatever, about like sending text messages like, how's it, how are the poor people doing back there?
I'm like, I booked my flight on points. I'm like, this is like 9,000 points, like totally worth it.
I've been upgraded to first class once in my life,
hmm
and it was so not worth it. It was like the shortest, not worth it flight, maybe like 45 minutes. I think it might have been like
Mm,
LAX to San Francisco. And it's
mm,
like, oh, you've been upgraded to first class. I'm like, fantastic. And I'm like,
yeah,
you sit down and you're there. It's
yeah.
nothing that great.
No, see,
But I bet you had a longer flight. You had a longer flight to Costa Rica.
this was 6.5 hours from LA to Costa Rica. It
Did
was
you have the lie
crazy.
flat? Did you have a lie flat
No,
bed?
it
Oh,
wasn't lie flat, but actually the seat next to me was also empty, which was kind of crazy.
what?
So yeah,
Wow.
it was
That's
just like
cool.
crazy experience. But yeah,
Yeah. No, have I told you I've ruined my daughter with lounges before? Have we had that story? Have I told you that story?
no, I don't think so. But I can imagine. My
It
parents
was
would just always be like, "Nope, you're not allowed in." Like,
Yeah, no. So we went on vacation and went to the lounge, and I was just super excited. I'm like, "All right, we can go to the lounge. This could be great." And I had to pay for them, but it was fine. It was honestly like paying that much on regular airport food versus getting in the lounge. To me, it's worth it.
mhm.
And we get her in there. I think she must have been. It must have been 2 years ago. She must have been in first grade. And we go to the lounge. We go to Hawaii. We're on vacation. We do the
Mhm.
thing. We come back, and then she had to write some sort of like journal entry as to what she did on her break or whatever it was. And and she writes, and it was like, it's the first grade or whatever. And she writes out, we went to Hawaii, and we went to the Sky Club. We went to Delta Sky Club. We went to Sky Club. She writes out the whole basically like we went to Hawaii for our break, and then we went to the Sky Club. And then the next line was, and I'm quoting her. This is exact. What is Sky Club, you ask? Question mark. Sky Club, and then she just starts describing this like premium experience, which you and I know, like it's nice, but it's not like
It's
it's
nothing
not.
to. It's
It's
not
really
like if you're going to Hawaii and you're talking about Sky Club, like there's something funny.
that was the funny part is that her entire journal entry was about Sky Club. That's all it was. And she was and so I think I over just talked it up way too much. And so now my wife and I have this constant conversation about how this idea of setting her up to really hate anything that isn't that level or higher. And we
hmm
feel so bad. We're like, oh my God, we're horrible parents because now every time she says something like, now the joke is she can't fly anything less than Comfort Plus, or like, she like we were looking at a possible future vacation, international, maybe
Mhm.
London, maybe Japan, just trying to book something.
Mhm.
And then we're looking at the flights, and she's looking at it with us. She's like, well, premium's what we want, right? Like, not we can't go down there. I'm like, well, we'll do what we can. Like, this is super expensive. Well, can we get business class? Can we get the beds? And I'm like, oh my God, no, we can't. Like, so
That's so funny.
so like both her and my wife will not fly unless it's like lounge and minimum Comfort Plus. And I'm like, well, looks like we're not going anywhere. Sorry.
Dang,
Like,
dang. Yeah, that's the one thing I'll make an except like I mean, yeah, I've lowered my tolerance to luxury for sure in like college and just like growing up. Like it's normally sun country that goes back and forth from
mhm.
Minneapolis to LA, which is like the Spirit Airlines of the Midwest, where
Yes.
everybody's a little bit nicer. It's a little bit better seats, but it
Tiny
pretty
planes
much
though.
is
Tiny
like,
planes
yep,
though too, right?
tiny planes. You just sit there for a couple hours. But I actually booked a flight to France after graduating,
Oh,
and
you did?
you will not believe this round trip price. I think round trip out of LA was like $400 or
What?
something. It was like
When?
ridiculously cheap. I think we booked it last week, but it's for like May 13th, I think we're leaving
Oh,
ish.
so you're getting in like right before summer rushes.
Yeah, yeah. And it's this random like small airline. I'm like, you know what? For that price round trip to Europe, I will sit in the crappiest plane for 10 hours and
Wait,
I will be happy to do it.
I have so many more questions. This is a direct flight?
Hmm. Or
And what's
I
the
think so.
airline?
Oh, some France one. They're also North Atlantic also does really cheap normally.
Okay. And that's from LA to Paris
Hmm.
to
We,
CDG?
we can connect offline if you
I
like
need,
have
I
some
need, I need, I
serious
need the
like
details. Yeah, I
hmm
need the details because it's like that's insane. We were
hmm
looking at trying to go to London. We're trying to look at Japan. My daughter's
hmm
obsessed with Japan right now. We
hmm
went to this local, there's this Japanese marketplace, Mitsuya marketplace in here in Torrance. We
hmm
went to it over the weekend and it was just mind blowing. Like how cool this like a food hall and Japanese. And I told my daughter while we were there, we were getting all the stuff, having fun, eating food, snacks, things like that. We went to check out, and my brain immediately went to that type of reserved nature when you think you're in another country and you're about to talk to someone that you don't know. Like, and I went and I put the stuff down and I was ready for like a question I wasn't going to understand because I felt like I was in another country.
hmm
And I was ready to start speaking slowly and try to figure out what I needed to do to pay. And I realized this is just some kid from Torrance. Like he's just doing checkout. He's like, "Do you need a bag?" I'm like, "Yeah, I need a bag. Thanks. That's cool. Thanks."
Yes. Yes. It's fun to get that experience. Those markets are really cool. A lot of
It's
lot
super
of
cool.
colors, a lot of things.
It's super cool.
Yeah, so we did have our witty banter at the
We
end.
did.
We
See, I
just
knew there's
talked about
stuff to talk about. There's
Mhm.
definitely stuff to talk about.
In
Cool.
tie-in like flying, traveling to come to USC for our perspective
Yeah,
and
book your
admitted
flight.
students events.
Tell us where you ate and what airport you went to.
Yeah.
Tell us how much you hate lounge people. I totally get it. I used to hate lounge people
Everybody's
until I
ex
became one.
Paul. Yeah, I think that's a pretty common trend. You can't hate it when you are that.
Exactly. Well, what's funny too is that like I very quickly, not the minute I became a lounge person, I very quickly became, why are there so many people in this lounge? Who let all these people in? I'm like, I'm probably
Mm.
one of the new people in because they opened them up
Hmm.
to all the credit cards
I
or whatever
know.
else.
Yeah. Though some credit card rules changed where like the bringing a
They just did.
companion's different. So I'm sure it'll
They just
be
did.
pretty quiet for a year or two.
Yeah. It's probably sharing too much, but that's exactly why I just switched credit cards
Hmm.
to make sure I've kept lounge status. It was the only
Yeah.
reason I did it.
Yeah. No, I'm like with the new job starting, I'm like, what credit card should I get? That's always something I've been like
Oh my
kind
God,
of
I love talking.
tracking. It's like,
I love talking about this. I talk to my staff about it all the time. I'm like,
mm,
let me tell you about the credit card game and let me tell you how to play it. And let me tell you
oh my
how
gosh.
it's dangerous, but it's well worth it, especially with us and our traveling. And it's like, pick a brand, be first of all with hotels, pick a brand, be
Mhm.
loyal.
Are you
Just
Marriott?
Marriott all the way.
Marriott,
Marriott
yeah.
all the way.
Hmm.
It's the easiest one to be loyal with. Like you could
Hmm.
just pick it and you're off and running. And then choose where you want to start as far as like accumulating points. And now there's so many, especially in the last like
Hmm.
3 months, they've changed so many different point
Hmm.
structures. But
do you use like the portals and the like transfer bonuses?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I don't, but that's the thing is like, and I know I'm a little bit different. I don't use like the generic like Capital One credit cards. I have had the Marriott card forever. It's like the first one I had,
Hmm.
and that's the one that always pays off the most. Like we've never had to pay for a hotel in any vacation we've ever had. And then I've always played around with airlines back and
Hmm.
forth. I went Amex, had that for a while with like the portal on like what we would use and where we would go. And then finally I just ditched that and now I'm on Delta. So it's like I got the Delta card and I got the Marriott card and those two things are kind of
Hmm.
funding as we go.
Yeah, I will probably be joining you in about 2 months. We'll
It's good.
see.
It's good. Just got to use the annual fees.
Yeah,
But other than that,
it's a fun game to play.
it's an obsessive game to play. Oh my God.
Hmm.
I don't like to go too deep into it, but it is fun to see how it goes.
Hmm. All right. Well, any final last words?
None of that any of our listeners cared at all about. And I'm so much witty banter. We got into nonsensical banter. I think that's enough for today. I hope everyone enjoys the episode, or at least the part that was relevant to you. We'll be back next week with another great episode of Viterbi Voices. See you then, folks. Bye.